What if I told you that this plant is thriving even though I'm growing this without a pot? Hi everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Super short and sharp video today. I previously told you about an experiment where I'm growing a plant without a pot. Well, I have continued this experiment and this is what the plant looks like now. Before I talk more about this plant, let's have a look at the past. So we have Monstera dubia over here, still in juvenile form. You can see it's in a quite small pot. It's 14 centimeters and the top of its moss pole finished over here. A couple of weeks ago it reached the top of its moss pole, so I just took a grow vertical pole and just stacked it inside. So these two poles aren't actually connected. The plant then started growing on that grow vertical pole and I want to cut that plant now and just continue growing it on that grow vertical pole without actually potting it up. Do you like my Monstera dubia? You can sniff, but you can't eat. Excuse me, you are blocking the view. So I just put a bit of wire at the top so I can just hang it on my wall, and I suppose I'll check in with you in a couple of months' time to see if this experiment was successful. 5 months later, this plant looks like this. I suppose the plant isn't thriving to its best ability, but I actually blame this on the conditions. This plant is actually growing outside at the moment. We are going into winter and it can go down to 7 or 8 degrees at nighttime. So the plant isn't having the best time adjusting to the cooler conditions. But despite that, it has grown 3 leaves for me since I gave it a chop. Well, the first leaf was this. I mean, a poor excuse of a leaf, but that was to be expected. When I gave it a chop, that plant now suddenly is missing all of that support system that it had down below. So it's gonna focus on growing a root system first before it's gonna give me new leaves. So it's always normal to have the first leaf being, well, a bit challenged, but straight after that it gave me this leaf with a decent size, and then it even started growing fenestrations. So you can't tell me that this plant isn't happy. If it's thriving to its best ability, but if I would want to make it thrive even more, I don't think I necessarily need to give it a pot straight away. I would just have to give it better conditions. The pole is a vertical extension of your pot, and as such, it can also be the pot in itself. The pole is filled with moss in this instance, and moss is a growing medium, so the plant has an easy time rooting into the moss and then establishing a new root system within the moss pole in itself. I'll bring it closer. Almost every single node has thrown a big chunky root into the pole, and now they're all coming out down here. Now, if we're looking at the back, and it's hard to see because it's not the see-through pole, but can you see these darker discolorations over here? Those are all roots. So this moss pole is full of roots. So in this instance, the moss pole isn't just an extension of the pot, the moss pole is the pot. And compared to a traditional pot where, well, really just the bottom nodes can root into the potting medium and then, you know, that root system is responsible for all of the plant, every single node has its own root system over here because every single node makes contact with the growing medium. Now, talking about the growing medium, yes, I chose moss because I've had the best experiences with moss and it's actually the cleanest, especially if you don't have a pot to catch anything falling out. The moss kind of just sticks in there by itself. But you could fill this with any other potting medium. So I've seen people use cocoa chips or bark, or most recently I also started using tree fern fiber, but that would all just fall through if you don't have a pot. Now, I've also seen people be creative and kind of just, yeah, come on, you can play with it. No, you don't want to play with it. Now, I've also seen people be creative and kind of clip this shut at the bottom so that the water doesn't just drip out. I grow mine outside, as I said before, so I don't mind water dribbling out of here. Talking about watering, now that the plant doesn't have a pot down below, it is even more essential that I am not letting the pole dry out completely. Whenever I talk about the moss pole, I basically just tell you to treat it in the exact same way as you would treat a pot. If you have a plant where you don't want the medium to dry out completely before the next watering, apply the same principle onto your moss pole as well. We're just doing it vertically instead of having this horizontal spread of a pot. But the principles are the exact same. This concept is also what enables me to propagate plants really well. Now that I know that every single node has rooted in here, I could just chop in between every single node and end up having 5 or 6 plants on the same moss pole over here. Today is the day where I'm going to part with this plant because realistically I have too many plants and I need to get rid of the duplicates. So this plant is going into Timmy's garden today, so I thought I'll film one last video to show you the update because I am pretty impressed with its growth. It has, and you can see that just on these 2 poles over here, you can still see, I mean, this is not the really juvenile dubia anymore. It's always somewhat transitioned from being a shingling plant, but it didn't have any fenestrations at the beginning of the pole down here, right? It has provided me with many leaves with beautiful fenestrations ever since. Now, of course, nothing compared to my actual mother plant that I grew, but there's many reasons why that might be. First of all, I do believe this plant has less light exposure than my mother plant. Certainly, I provide it with much less nutrients, which is most likely the main reason why this plant is not as large as the mother plant. But obviously also these roots down here, and I have cut off many roots previous to that. I'm not taking full advantage of the potential that these roots have. So there's obviously a few reasons why this plant isn't thriving as much as my mother plant is, but that doesn't mean that it's not thriving. And the convenience of not having a pot is actually really nice. I just hang this in my greenhouse and don't have to worry about anything. I certainly don't have to worry about overwatering, for example, because the water is just going to drain out of here. So I mainly have to worry about underwatering. Bradley, where are you? Hello! The bottom part of the pole is not opaque, but you might be able to see some roots coming through here. Actually, I mean, I can see it in real life. I just don't know if it translates on camera. I mean, you can certainly see the roots coming out here, but the top one over here is more opaque. So you should be able to see some of these roots poking through over here. And those are the ones that the plant relies upon. So really important to keep the moss pole moist and provide it with nutrients. I just wanted to show you that this concept of growing without a pot certainly comes with limitations when it comes to really optimizing the plant's growth. But the limitations aren't big enough to say like you will never get a nice plant out of this, right? Ultimately, the conditions that this plant is grown in and the care, so the fertilizing, the watering, the consistency that you provide is more important than the size of the pot or whether it even has a pot at all. Alrighty, short and sharp video. I'll end it over here. I hope this was valuable to you and I'll see you next time. Bye.